Thank you for tuning in and welcome back to the Sandwich of Coherency. So let's just go ahead and jump right into this. Recently, there's been a new whistleblower. I'm sure you've all heard about it, and with all the new documents about what's happening between the war between Russia and Ukraine, or at this point, I guess it must be admitted what we've all been telling you from the beginning, the war between the US and Russia. And mind you, this is what most of the Democrats in power have wanted since Obama was in office. They've been wanting a full-on conflict between the US and Russia. Is it because many of them are invested in the weapons manufacturers? And I mean, the more weapons we produce, the more money they can make? Or is it because there's this idea that they could sell themselves into permanent positions of power? Because mind you, should there be any full-on public battle between the US and Russia, that would get very dangerous. That would get very deadly. And by law in the United States, such things such as voting for your leaders and your officials would be put on a halt due to the severity of said conflict. So, could it give them the authority to immediately during wartime be able to put in extreme measures? I mean, look, I'm going out on a limb with all this because this is something we hope would never exactly happen, but I'm getting off base. Let's get back to the topic at hand here, which is the whistleblower and the many on the left. There's idea they have that this guy is the bad guy. He has done the worst and most terrible thing, and we've covered the whole whistleblower laws. We did this last year, and it's funny because it was actually around this same time, because that was during the time when they wanted to try and extradite Julian Assange to the United States, and we covered those whistleblower protections, which have really been in place since 1777. But let's go ahead and jump into this little bit from Tucker Carlson, and we'll actually get back into that again. So, yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into that.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. For the past 14 months, you have heard two main things about the war in Ukraine. The first is that the war in Ukraine is a war of national sovereignty. It is not a proxy battle between superpowers. Russia invaded Ukraine. That was immoral. The United States supports Ukraine because the United States supports democracy. But the United States itself is not at war with Russia. This is Ukraine's war to fight. The second thing we have heard over and over again is that Ukraine is winning that war. Ukrainian troops are brave and noble. Russian troops are evil and incompetent. The Ukrainians are beating the Russians. In the end, their victory is inevitable. Now, you're very familiar with these points because you have heard them every day since last February. You've heard them repeated by every power center in the United States, the Pentagon, the White House, the leaders of both parties in Congress, CEOs, and celebrities. And most insistently of all, you've heard them from virtually every single outlet along the entire spectrum of our national news media. These are the two essential themes of the war in Ukraine, and both of them are lies. We know that they're lies because late last week, leaked intelligence about the war in Ukraine began to appear on social media. Briefing slides prepared by the U.S. government began to show up, among other places, on Twitter. And the slides show that this is in fact not Ukraine's war. It's our war. The United States is a direct combatant in a war against Russia. As we speak, American soldiers are fighting Russian soldiers. So this is not a regional conflict in Eastern Europe.
And I want to pause right there. This is also one of those things that I've been screaming from the top of the mountain, since 2014, 2015? That yes, U.S. troops have been on the ground. And even right now, it's even more so to really think about that, because before this whole conflict, this new conflict began, one of the main things that was coming out of Ukrainian media, which was, now this is right before Zelensky took over all media and decided to start jailing journalist that told the truth about what's happening in Ukraine, basically saying things that he didn't approve of. One thing we know is that the United States had 15, yeah, not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, but 15 biological germ labs operating in Ukraine. And, you know, going back and looking through news articles, the Ukrainian people were not happy, and they knew for years, and they've been trying to get these things out. And the thing is the Russians also knew this, and this is one of the things that Putin did mention. And if you look at the trajectory of the Russian troops at one point during the beginning, they were making their way strategically towards what was believed to be the secret locations of those biological labs. So what has come of that? Well, it's hard to know because again, all media has basically been censored coming out of Ukraine. And, you know, I was going through just dozens of newspapers, different independent sites, as well as Ukrainian television. And all of it had been blocked. So access to it from many parts of the world, as I was checking, were actually blocked. So, you know, it just makes you kind of wonder, especially when you think about the fact that everybody in the world pretty much, you know, especially in countries like that, have cell phones. So many people with cell phones. And I think it's just kind of, it's crazy to me that if you think about like during 9/11 here in the United States, cameras on phones and videos like that was not something that was accessible like that. So you didn't have those kind of videos all over the place then. But, you know, we always say to ourselves, if that happened now with all the cell phones and technology we have, you would have tons of videos. Well, right now we have this situation happening over there, and you don't have tons of videos. So I don't know. I just think there's something about that that's a little bit interesting. But let's keep going.
This is a hot war between the two primary nuclear superpowers on Earth. And yet this war has never been formally declared. It has not been authorized by Congress. And for that reason, this war is a violation of American law. It is a crime. The second thing we learn from these slides is that despite direct U.S. involvement, Ukraine is in fact losing the war. 7 Ukrainians are being killed for every Russian. Ukrainian air defenses have been utterly degraded. Ukraine is losing. The Biden administration is perfectly aware of this. They're panicked about it, but they have lied about this fact to the public. Just 2 weeks ago, for example, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin told the U.S. Senate that Russian military power is, quote, waning. In other words, Russia is losing the war. That was a lie. He knew it was when he said it, but he repeated it in congressional testimony. That is a crime. But Lloyd Austin has not been arrested for committing that crime. Instead, the only man who has been taken into custody, or likely ever will be, is a 21-year-old Massachusetts Air National Guardsman who leaked the slides that showed that Lloyd Austin was lying. He revealed the crimes, therefore he's the criminal. That's how Washington works. Telling the truth is the only real sin. Now, our news media exist and have constitutional protection precisely in order to push back against this grotesque standard. Their only job is to tell the truth. And yet tonight, the news media are celebrating.
I want to pause it right there. All right, look. It is the irony of even Tucker Carlson pointing out that it's the job of the news and media to tell the truth. I think that's just absolutely hilarious because, let's be honest, Fox News, like other mainstream media, has long been known for lying and just making shit up. You know, I mean, just lying their asses off. Like, this is just absolutely insane. And to me, the hilarious part about it is the fact that shit has gotten so off the wall that literally they can just tell the truth now. Literally, you can have Fox News, as Tucker Carlson is right now, simply telling the truth. And it's just freaking, it's incredible. I mean, the other media is so bad that you now can be rest assured that you're probably going to get more honest reporting from Fox News, and that should tell you something about how the world's fucking gotten. I mean, maybe it's just me, but let's continue.
The capture of the kid who told Americans what's actually happening in Ukraine. They are treating him like Osama bin Laden, maybe a little worse, actually, because unlike Al Qaeda, apparently this kid is a racist. Here's CNN.
The Washington Post, as you know, reviewed video of this suspect yelling racial and anti-Semitic slurs.
Is this a dangerous person? This Air Guardsman who's now been taken into custody had talked about being a gun enthusiast, had been at gun ranges. He's obviously a member of the military.
And he's the big guy in the scene. Somehow he has access to this kind of information, and that makes him even larger.
A person who thinks they know better than everyone else, they're smarter than everyone else in their view.
And that this is a 21-year-old man. He's described as a gun enthusiast. Feels like in some of these descriptions, somebody who's maybe hungry for power.
You may pause it right there. I apologize for all these interruptions. But, I mean, what did he say? The Washington Post says they report that he was seen making racist remarks, anti-Semitic remarks. Probably not. Is that possible? Yes. Is it possible? Yeah. Is it possibly that that's a lie? Yeah, it's a possibility. All they have to say is that, well, a source close to the person said that they saw this or they heard this, and that's all they have to say to get away with it. Literally what they're doing now is character destruction. And this should give you some idea of the actual severity and importance of the information that this guy is saying. They're less focused on what's actually in this stuff. You can say what he did was scandalous all you want. Fine. But you completely ignore the information in the documents is a complete disservice to the citizens. And to say that, oh, well, you know, he thinks he knows better than everybody else. No. Is it wrong to think that people should probably be aware of something like this? I mean, I would find that military conflict between the United States and Russia is something that every citizen in the United States would want to be aware of, considering the fact that they've harped so long that Russia's the enemy, Russia will drop nukes on the United States, Russia's going to do this and do that, but don't tell the people that we're doing anything. Just let it be a surprise if shit starts blowing up. I think the reality is that we have troops on the ground. And they didn't want people to know we had troops on the ground because they don't want American citizens to know that we are over there running missions, basically antagonizing the Russians. What they wanted was for, as I said before, the Russians to react. They want the Russians to launch some sort of attack that is direct towards the United States. That way they could say that Russia, unprovoked, attacked the United States. But the reality is we were over there causing the provocation. It's the same thing that happened during the Vietnam War with the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Okay, we didn't want the people to know that we were blowing our own shit up and blaming it on the Vietnamese just so we could have a reason to be further engaged. And this is what's happening now. We don't want people to know that the United States has people over there instigating situations against Russia to cause them to attack against us so we could have a reason to justify a public engagement. Well, let's continue.
So this 21-year-old Air National Guardsman from Massachusetts is not a whistleblower, CNN explains, with the help of the many intelligence agency figures it has now hired as analysts. No, he's not a whistleblower. He's a criminal. Because he is, unlike the people who run our government, quote, hungry for power. And because this 21-year-old was so hungry for power, federal law enforcement had to swing into action with unfamiliar speed and efficiency and apprehend him. He was that threatening. Now, keep in mind, as of tonight, we still don't know where Jeffrey Epstein got hundreds of millions of dollars. We have no idea. Nor do we know what he did for a living. We don't know who left pipe bombs on Capitol Hill on January 6th, 2 of them. We don't know who leaked the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. We can't even say for certain who killed the President of the United States, because after 60 years, the Biden administration is still hiding thousands of pages of classified documents from the Kennedy assassination, just as they are hiding more than 1 billion other classified documents. But tonight, we can say for dead certain who embarrassed Toria Nuland and Joe Biden. And that kid is going to jail for a long, long time. That's the standard. The media are fine with that standard. Watch this remarkable exchange.
I'm going to pause right there before he gets to this next part. Victoria Nuland, as I've talked about before, is the woman we've gone over the phone calls between her and actors loyal to the United States in Ukraine back in, I believe it was 2014, because she helped to facilitate the overthrow of the, at that time, democratically elected president of Ukraine. And this all came about because he decided he didn't want to enter into a trade agreement with the European Union. He wanted to enter into a trade agreement with Russia. And a partnership between Ukraine and Russia was bad for business, and some could say, especially for the United States, considering that the United States, Russia, and Ukraine are the 3 largest wheat producers in the world. So you can imagine the United States really not wanting Ukraine and Russia to partner up. So the United States, under Obama, facilitated the overthrow of the democratically elected president of Ukraine at the time. And Victoria Nuland is the wench that was on the phone that helped facilitate that. We literally have the phone calls, the proof, the evidence. But what did they say? Because Russia disseminated that information, we will not act on that information. We admit the phone calls were true. We admit the information is true, but because it came from Russia, we will not prosecute anyone. And they didn't. But let's continue.
Exchange on Monday of this week between the White House press corps and Biden flack John Kirby.
Without confirming the validity of the documents, this is information that has no business in the public domain. It has no business, if you don't mind me saying, on the pages of front pages of newspapers or on television. It is not intended for public consumption, and it should not be out there.
So the fact that U.S. soldiers are fighting Russian soldiers in a war in Ukraine has no business in the public domain.
All right, I'm just going to go ahead and stop right there. But yeah, it has every business in the public domain. And the reason I want to point that out is I want to give you an idea of why this is important. Because what we have from the U.S. Department of Interior, as you can see on your screen, is the whistleblower protection. Okay? And what is whistleblower retaliation? Congress passed the Whistleblower Protection Act of 1989, which, among other things, was intended to strengthen and improve protections for the rights of federal employees and to prevent reprisals. The purpose of the WPA was to help eliminate wrongdoing within the government by mandating that employees should not suffer adverse consequences as a result of disclosing a violation of law rule, or regulation, gross mismanagement, a gross waste of funds, an abuse of authority, or a substantial and specific danger to public health or safety. I would say that U.S. troops engaging against Russian troops is a substantial and specific danger to public health and safety. Wouldn't you? I would think that that's, you know, really important. So there are some avenues for the guy who released the information to be protected. A lot of it will be under what grounds he released it under. He would probably have more protection if he had released it to a journalist or whatnot. And this will actually come back on him. The way this will move forward really is, did he attempt to take this to any higher ups or anyone else in his office? Because if he did that and no one acted upon that and basically push that information to the side, then he does have more legal protections for that point afterwards, divulging the information to the public. So, and just to give you an idea, because of what, again, I'm going to cover these because we went over these before, but again, I think it's significant to right now when you think of have there been other people throughout United States history that have done something similar to what he's did. And, this goes all the way back to 1773. Let's see, we're on the Government Accountability Project here now. Let's see, confidential letters exposed by Benjamin Franklin proved the governor of Massachusetts misled Parliament to promote a military buildup in the New World. Okay. Let's see, 1777, U.S. naval officers Samuel Shaw and Richard Marvin revealed the torture of British POWs. And they had put in place protections for whistleblowers after that. And again, as we talked about before, you got General Smedley Butler, who divulged to Congress that corporations, business leaders, as Bird's Eye, Colgate, Standard Oil, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, J.P. Morgan, the whole lot of them, Harriman, just all of them had attempted to hire U.S. Vets to overthrow the president. Because at the same time, they were the ones who were helping to fund Adolf Hitler during World War II, and they wanted to try and bring that to the United States. So, But again, there are protections for whistleblowers, but I just want to bring that back up again, because as this is going on, this guy has protections. And I want you to be aware of those as you watch how the Biden administration violates all of them, and violates them in ways that you're not going to, oh my gosh, this is going to be really bad. But we'll see what happens. But I thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.